Hi everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of The Crypto Scout. I'm your humble host Brian, and today we have an interesting interview with Professor Wulf Kaal, who's working on the Semada protocol. Semada, or the Semada project, is being labeled as a blockchain 4.0. Obviously, that means there's going to be high levels of throughput as well as something else that gives it that magic touch of being better than other blockchains. So what is it exactly that some of these blockchain 3.0s like EOS or Cardano or Lisk, etc. are missing? And I think Semada actually has some very good arguments about what is needed to be the next level of blockchain to be really widely adopted and something that the internet really needs right now. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the interview and tell you guys exactly what Semada is all about. Hi everyone, we're here now with Professor Wulf Kaal from Semada. And today we're going to actually get into the thick of it and talk about exactly what Semada is and why they're doing what they're doing and how. So we're going to give you all the specifics right now. We're going to jump into the weeds of Semada project. And let's just jump straight into it, Wulf. How you doing today, by the way?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for doing this. Thanks for setting this up.
Yeah, no, my pleasure for sure. Wulf and I met at the Tulip conference actually, and I've been working a little bit together over the last couple months almost now, I guess. Yeah. So there's been a number of instances where I've got to learn a little bit about Semada, but I still don't understand the basics of what Semada is trying to do. So can you explain kind of just what is the Semada project or protocol?
Sure. So Semada is a fourth generation blockchain. Very basic. We are trying to improve certain things that others have improved and add additional layers on top of it. So third generation blockchains, they're out there. They're mostly addressing scalability issues, and the big names, we all know them, and they're doing very well at that. What Semada is doing is we are also addressing blockchain scalability by way of our reputation verification protocol that we are actually using. So the voting algorithm is used to create a consensus algorithm. Voting algorithm testing is phase one, consensus algorithm and block building is phase two. And so you may know that a lot of the top blockchains out there, they're addressing scalability issues and they're doing pretty well. Some of them claim 50,000 transactions with optimization per second. That's a little bit ideal typical, but those issues are being addressed. And we feel that the protocol, Semada protocol that is in the block building is capable of doing the same, if not significantly better, but we haven't tested it yet. Mm-hmm. But what we're adding that makes it a fourth generation blockchain is really an evolutionary governance protocol that really helps overcome some of the core problems that we're seeing in this space that others have been struggling with. Some are addressing it with constitutions, arbitration systems, and so forth. Mm-hmm. If you have a protocol that allows an evolutionary governance, and that's really what Semada does. So in addition to building our own blockchain, we have this platform that allows this evolutionary system, and that, in our minds, makes it a fourth generation blockchain.
Okay, so high throughput and revolutionary governance. That's interesting. We'll probably retouch on that in a minute, but going into what kind of a blockchain you are, how would you say? What are some of the reasons why you made Semada? Like, what were some of the issues going on with other blockchains, for example, that you're like, okay, so there's an issue here that I think I could actually solve for everybody in the community?
Okay, so at the core, at the real pure core is trust in decentralized networks, right? So pure actual decentralization. Not what a lot of people are claiming in this space in terms of being decentralized, and then it turns out the whales are making all the decisions. We wanted to, from the get-go, so this started 2 years ago, we wanted to create a system that is completely autonomous, and creates trust. So once it's out there, we can't control it. Nobody can control it. Right?
That's
You
right.
can build use cases around it, but nobody can control it.
Yep.
Including the founders. We have no
Right.
control whatsoever. And so we really wanted to create a system that is completely autonomous and creates trust in crypto transactions. So these can be anonymous or open identifiable transactions. If you think about what smart contracting does, the pure mathematical logic has a lot of power, right? So we have self-governance, self-execution, auto-execution, all these tremendously beneficial aspects. But as these smart contracts grow and evolve, what we're seeing is that parties really stop collaborating because they're trying to maximize their own utility, to use economic terms. I'm an economist, and that the collaboration in some, especially in decentralized anonymous networks, can really suffer. So what Semada does is it creates trust by way of reputation verification in decentralized systems with anonymous players.
Okay. Interesting. Just a moment ago, you mentioned that you're an economist. Next, I kind of want to just ask kind of some of your background. Who are you? What's your background in? How long have you been in the blockchain or crypto space, as I like to call it?
Sure. So yeah, I'm a PhD trained economist, born and raised in Europe. I'm a dual citizen, American and European, and I'm a PhD economist, but I'm also a practicing lawyer. So I came to the United States for my PhD studies and started law school here, and then worked for Cravath in New York for several years before joining Goldman Sachs in London. There I was in the securities division, and in those days, just to give you sort of background, we had algorithmic trading. We had about 35% a year growth rates, and so that was a big wake-up call for me in those years. But I always knew I wanted to do my own thing, so I decided to leave Goldman and become an academic, and started a consulting business on the side. And at some point, so this was mostly tech and hedge fund specific consulting. At some point, I had worked with a client on the product side, and they said, so this was about 6 years ago now, and they said, oh, why don't you join us? We're trying to figure out this new technology. And so I started talking to them, and initially, I mean, in 2009, I had dismissed it as a payment system problem. So big mistake, obviously. So then I started working with them, and it took me about almost a year to just warm up to this whole idea of decentralized networks. And so then I started teaching it in Europe, in Amsterdam and Tilburg, and now I teach coding for lawyers in the United States. And so yeah, that's where the whole thing started for me.
Wow, coding for lawyers, that's got to be pretty cutting edge, right?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else is doing it. People are talking about it there, but they're not actually teaching code for legal solutions. They're just teaching concepts. So yeah, I always felt that the hard side. Run with it.
Interesting. Is Semada going to have smart contracts kind of built into it so that you could technically build legally binding agreements over the blockchain?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh wow, that's exciting.
That's all part of it.
When did you guys actually start on Semada then?
So this started almost 2 years ago when Craig, my co-founder, dear friend Craig Calcaterra, Craig and I actually knew his wife. His wife was one of my students, and she told him about what we talked about in class, and then said to me at some point, oh, why don't you talk to my husband? He's a mathematician. So Craig is a math professor, and probably the leading expert for distributed systems and among some other. We were introduced. He showed up in my office one day, and I said, I love mathematicians. You guys are so relevant for what I want to do. And we started talking, and it's all started with this idea of fixing smart contracts. So we all realize that smart contracts are super powerful, but have huge problems. So, even under 150 lines of code can have bugs, tremendous bugs, right? That people don't understand and create all kinds of problems. And so I started realizing that smart contracting is the future on so many levels, but creating legal certainty for smart contracting counterparties, that was something that was very near and dear to my heart. And so I said to him, "Hey, I really would like to write an article about what I called at this time, so 2 years ago, distributed jurisdiction." He looked at me and said, "What are you talking about? What you're describing cannot be done." And I said, "Okay, well, let's just have weekly meetings, and we'll keep talking." And so then it took about 4 months or so, or 3 months or so, and then I sent him the Aragon paper. And the Aragon paper had a governance layer in there that they added on at the very end, and that ignited him. And then all of a sudden we started talking, and he jumped on it and started realizing that we can actually build this, right? There's actually a mathematical ways forward in this to create a decentralized reputation-based, in this case, reputation-based jurisdictional means, so meaning precedent. So how can we create precedent as equivalent to legal precedent in distributed systems, right? That was the core question. And so yeah, we took it from there, and we published this article together called Distributed Jurisdiction. And from there, it evolved into, so initially we always talked about, how do we fix smart contracts and how we allocate an arbitration layer to smart contracts to help people overcome the problems in smart contracting outside of the existing court system, right? So our baseline assumption was always that the existing court system cannot fulfill the needs here because it's fully anonymized, and there's some counter arguments to that for bigger smart contracting. But the core understanding is, and to this day, I firmly believe it, especially if you look at Zcash and Monero type transactions, where we have additional layers of encryption. It's very hard for the existing legal infrastructure to actually create legal certainty and solutions for smart contracting counterparties. So this article we wrote is really about figuring out ways to use the technology itself to create an intra-blockchain legal system. And that dialogue led to the recognition that reputation, which is what Semada is all about, reputation, decentralized, autonomous, and anonymous networks is core for fixing those issues, to create trust between counterparties, like a legal system. Yeah. So a legal system, why do people need legal systems? Well, it creates legal certainty. Yeah. So if something goes wrong between two counterparties, people can default into rules that they know their lawyers can operate within, right? That creates certainty. It creates trust for people to want to engage in commerce. That doesn't exist right now in smart contracting. If we only rely on code, right? So the mathematical accuracy of code and the preordained solutions, legal solutions in code, that doesn't always work. So we need another trust layer, and that is Semada. That's reputation verification. Yeah?
Wow. That's really interesting. That actually makes me want to ask, do you think that the smart contracts that have a compliance layer to them, are they going to basically be forever not meeting or trying to avoid meeting with U.S. law, for example, or any nation's laws, for example? Let's just say the smart contracts outcome wasn't favorable for either party somehow, and they couldn't come to some kind of arbitration. Getting actual normal lawyers like yourself involved, is that something that you see being a problem down the line? Or like I'm trying to understand if these two are ever going to meet, or are you trying to basically keep everything in the blockchain and try to keep it completely isolated from normal national laws?
Okay, so this really depends. The answer to this question really depends on what you believe the evolution of crypto to be. If you believe that...
Sorry, you just broke up. Could you go back one second? You just broke up for a minute there.
Yeah, so it really, the answer to your question really depends on what you believe the evolution of crypto to be.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe that in the future we will see governments, courts, jurisdictions exercise control over counterparties in decentralized autonomous systems, then the answer would be yes, the existing legal infrastructure plays a role. If you say no, absolutely not, they can never fully exercise jurisdiction over this because it's decentralized nodes around the world that have no physical presence, which is a legal requirement, by the way. If your answer is no, then you may call into question typically those two extremes. The truth is somewhere in the middle, right? So we will very likely see some decentralized networks that operate more within the existing legal infrastructure set up by governments. Other decentralized networks will very likely exist in some sort of hybrid form. Yeah, and so we will see these hybrids evolve and possibly even very pure systems. Semada is really is playing a role in between the two. Yeah, you can use reputation verification in anonymous decentralized systems and combine it with the existing legal infrastructure, or use it exclusively. And we're actually working on this right now with our main architects, exclusively in a decentralized network, right? And you can combine those two spheres. Yeah, so there is no clear-cut answer about this. That's why that's the beauty of a fourth-generation crypto infrastructure product such as Semada, because all these questions are going to evolve over time and require community input and evolve with the community. Yeah, so the platform just sets up the baseline architecture infrastructure for people to build these new solutions on top of.
That is really cutting edge, and that's really exciting to hear. Because personally, I'm all for a decentralized future for blockchains, but I feel kind of like most governments are trying to slowly take more control from them. But we don't have to get into that. I'm actually more curious now as to what is the roadmap going forward for Semada at this time. Like,
So,
what do you, immediately and maybe more long term.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to do it. So immediately, we have 3 phases. Phase 1 is testing our voting algorithm for the Semada core as a dApp, and backtesting it, making sure it's stable, bug-free, and we need the ability to show statistical results in different environments for the algorithm. That's phase 1. Phase 2 then is we will fork the underlying blockchain and use the voting algorithm as a consensus algorithm for block building. We are then testing the consensus algorithm parameters. We are testing the performance, and we're doing the same thing as in phase 1, changing the environment, changing specifications, and looking for optimal outcomes. Then phase 3, and in phase 2, we can already start building application layers around Semada core. And phase 3 really is adding the governance protocol by way of a weighted DAG on top of it. And phase 3 is really where we need community buy-in and community evolution of those protocols.
Interesting. So how is Semada being built, by the way? Is it a hard fork of another protocol or blockchain, or is it proprietary, or?
We are very likely hard forking the Ethereum infrastructure.
Okay, interesting, cool. Here's an interesting question for you then. So let's say down the line, maybe it's years down the line, how do you see your blockchain, Semada, how do you see it getting adapted? What's the best case scenario for it being used widely within the blockchain community?
Okay, so initially, we expect people to recognize our results and recognize what the essence of a 4th-generation blockchain really is, and that means they need to appreciate the differentiators between a 3rd-generation and a 4th-generation blockchain. Yeah, and once the community starts appreciating what the difference is, and we are working on continuously explaining, of course, the difference and our vision for that difference. Once the community appreciates that, we then we are inviting the community to present use cases. We, of course, at Semada, we will focus on the use cases that we identify as core for Semada. But through APIs, we're inviting anybody to build their own products on top of it.
Excellent. In that case, how do you see would you say you have a specific use case for identity and protecting people's reputation? Because earlier you've mentioned that. So like, what's the most, like for Ethereum, for example, like you could argue that their killer app is simply that you can build smart contracts on their platform. What would you say is your best way of competing with some of your predecessors?
So we have two protocols that are part of the Semada core. So one is, of course, the Semada proof of stake algorithm. But then based on that, we have what we call the sock puppet protocol and the persona protocol. So let me start out with the sock puppet protocol. So the sock puppet protocol, what are sock puppets? Well, sock puppets are fake internet accounts that are talking to each other, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
In other words, Sybil attacks, right? So Sybil attacks and majority attack and all the other attacks that are possible, DOS attacks and so forth, that are possible, they are at the core of the Semada protocol. Yeah, and so we call it sock puppet protocol because the protocol is intended to deal with Sybil attacks in reputation systems.
Okay.
So we claim that we are Sybil attack resistant, and nobody could show us at this point any means of Sybil attacking the core infrastructure that Semada is building. Yeah, so that's the sock puppet protocol. So we're building this out as a Sybil attack resistant protocol in reputation systems as a fourth generation blockchain. And then the next one is the persona protocol, where we're using the reputation verification metrics to create what is currently discussed as self-sovereign identity. The literature is just starting to evolve right now, this word of self-sovereign identity. So how are millennials and their children going to deal with online personality, personas? How are they going to use the existing centralized ways of KYC? Well, maybe not. So we have to, and this is why it's, again, fourth generation. These are all things that are evolving right now. We have to figure out ways to give people online identities that are fully decentralized. The persona protocol, by way of reputation verification in decentralized, autonomous, and anonymous networks, I know that's a mouthful, sorry, is facilitating exactly that. Yeah. So we are giving the reputation verification gives people the ability to have an online identity in different areas. What we call on Semada, we call it expertise tags within different trees of expertise tags, right? People are no longer identified by their race, their history and whatnot. They identify by what people are adding, how are people acting in those expertise tags, what value are they creating, and are they voted up by the communities or down? Yeah. So you can create a whole persona identity within those expertise tags, and that's what the persona protocol describes on the Semada platform.
Wow, that's really revolutionary. That's starting to bring up some thoughts of like Martin Luther King there, because a way to decentralize people's identity, get away from identifying people by a certain creed, color, culture, etc., and really just identify people by their deeds and actions here on Earth. So that's really exciting. Wow. Now that I've heard everything you've said, I can see how you're really nothing like some of the other protocols and blockchains out there, like Bridge, like the Key or Civic, that are trying to control one's identity, but they're really not. They're not smart smart contract compatible. They're not fourth generation. It doesn't sound like they have nearly as many transactions per minute that we know of today. None of these have those kinds of capabilities. So, wow, that was really exciting. It sounds like you're basically in a league of your own. To keep it short and sweet, I would say that basically summarizes what Semada is. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell listeners about how to follow you, how to find you?
Yeah, I mean, we're of course in all the social media channels, Telegram and so forth. Yeah, please join us if you have ideas, input, concerns. We want to hear from you, and we're team building. So top talent, we are recruiting top talent all the way, every day. So we want to hear from you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Wulf Kaal. I think that was an excellent interview, and I hope all of you guys enjoyed that. And if you did, please like and subscribe to the channel, and find both of us on social media and join Semada's Telegram group. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.